On Friday, I sat down at my desk at the hospital, and my phone pinged, which is usually the sign that the New York Times has something really important that I need to read about. And so I opened up the email, and it was indeed a New York Times announcement that Leonard Nimoy had passed away at age 83. Now, we've seen many famous people passing away over the years, and it seems that over this last 12-month period we have lost many notables, but something about Leonard Nimoy's death really touched me. I'm one of those kids who grew up watching Star Trek. It was a delight of my young life to watch Mr. Spock and Captain Kirk and all of the rest of the crew zipping across the galaxy, having adventures. Now, in all honesty, though, I was a child of the 70s, and so I missed a lot of what was really taking place in this futuristic morality play. I grew up with Spock, the logical Vulcan who would tell people, live long and prosper. And yes, I practiced, but so many people who had to get that hand gesture, and I found, you got it, excellent. Yeah, keep working. But I learned that, even during the filming of Star Trek, there were cast members who couldn't quite get the gesture, and they'd have to work things out beforehand and then just bring it up really fast before their fingers fell apart. But that Vulcan greeting, that live long and prosper, was something that for my generation was already in the water. But for many, it was a beginning. And Leonard Nimoy, in fact, told the story of where that came from. And most people don't know this story, so if you do, just bear with me. Leonard Nimoy is Jewish, and he grew up in the synagogue. And within Judaism, there is an ancient tradition of blessing, where the priests in the temple, the Kohanim, would bless the people. And of course, after the destruction of the temple, the descendants of those priests, frequently named Cohen or Kohan, would get together in the synagogue, would come up onto the bema, and would bless the people. They'd put their prayer shawls up over their heads. They would extend their hands in blessing. This, by the way, is the shape of the Hebrew letter Shin, which begins the words Shaddai, which is Lord, Shalom, which is peace, and also Shekinah, which is the holy presence of God. And so the Kohanim would raise their hands in blessing for the people and say, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with kindness and give you peace." It's an ancient Jewish blessing. And most folks think they're just being Trekkies. Nimoy had laughed about it, saying, people do it thinking that they're just doing Star Trek and they don't realize they're blessing one another. But that message of blessing was really at the foundation of Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry, in explaining what was in his mind as he created this futuristic exploration of the galaxy, said, Star Trek was an attempt to say that humanity will reach maturity and wisdom on the day that it begins not just to tolerate, but take special delight in differences, in ideas, and differences in life forms. If we cannot learn to actually enjoy those small differences, to take a positive delight in those small differences between our own kind here on this planet, then we do not deserve to go out into space and meet the diversity that is almost certainly out there. And so the crew of the Enterprise launched out on their 5-year mission back in the 60s. In a day when Captain Kirk's kissing Lieutenant Uhura was scandalous because of their races and not because of a breach of command structure. That line about to boldly go where no man has gone before has echoed again and again, shifting into the words of Patrick Stewart saying, to boldly go where no one has gone before, because we realize that you ladies are on the move as well. Star Trek went on to become 6 separate television series and a dozen feature films, and counting. It's something that we need to hear about, something that we need to remember, because that journey into the diversity of creation still echoes with us today. It's an ancient story that going out on a mission to discover, that's what Abram was called to, and Sarai as well. When God spoke to them and said, go to a place that I will show you, and I will make you the father and the mother of nations. Abram and Sarai had no clue where they were going. They were boldly going where no one had gone before. They were following God's promise. They were making their way out across uncharted wilderness to find a future to which God was calling them. At 75 years old, Abram did his best. He and Sarai went forth trusting that God would give them the blessing that was promised, the blessing of children. Children like the sands of the seashore, or like the stars in the sky. But it didn't happen. They wandered, they set up shop, they tried to create a family, but nothing happened. Abram, in his desperation, turned to his wife's servant, Hagar, fathering a child, Ishmael, who became the father of the Arab peoples. But still with Sarah, nothing happened. Nothing, nothing, nothing. For 25 years. Until at age 99, until at age 99, Sarah and Abram finally conceived. They conceived the child of their laughter, Isaac. The child that would become the father of the Jewish people. And so in that ancient prophecy that Abram would become the father of nations, it came to pass. And Sarai, she got a new name too. Sarah, princess. It's amazing how things change on the journey. How we set out sometimes thinking that we know what the answer is going to be, thinking that we know precisely where we're going. Yet just like for Abram and Sarai, that journey turns out to be different than our expectations. Just like for the crew of the Enterprise, it's a 5-year mission that keeps going and going and going and transforming, and even entering into alternate realities. We find ourselves remaking ourselves because the journey keeps changing and keeps changing us in the process. as a people journeying through the season of Lent, we find ourselves confronted again and again by a journey that is uncomfortable, that leads us to places that maybe we would rather not be. But when we embrace that journey, when we split our infinitives and find ourselves in a course of boldly going, we're changed by it. It's our faith, really, that catches us, that takes hold of us, and that leads us ever forward. In his letter to the Romans, the Apostle Paul spoke of the faith of Abraham, whose trust, because faith, by the way, is a verb. It has to do with trusting, not just in believing something. It's more like, instead of saying, I believe that gravity exists, expecting gravity to exist. Faith in God is like that. That when we believe, it changes our behavior. And so in Romans, Paul wrote that Abram's faith was reckoned to him as righteousness. An important line there. Righteousness, that correctness, that justification, to use that good theological language, that sense of doing things the way we should. That it was his faith that was reckoned to him as righteousness, and not his righteousness. That it was his belief and his trust in God that got him through, not the fact that he always did everything exactly the way he should have. Oh yes, perhaps you should have asked your wife before you went off with her servant. Abram didn't always get it right. But his faith in God was reckoned to him as righteousness. Each time we gather, we have our prayer of confession, where we tell God, God, we screwed up. Forgive us. Darn it, we need it. It's part of our worship. We know that we're not righteous. That even though we might hope, even though we might plan, even though we might set out on a journey of doing the best things, we indeed fail. We fall down. We find ourselves sinning. But Abram's faith was reckoned to him as righteousness. And so we too, in our faith in God through Jesus Christ, find forgiveness. We find wholeness. We find peace. And we find power. We find the power to share a word of shalom. We find the power to share together in Shekinah, in that holy presence of God, El Shaddai. We find blessing, a blessing that reminds us that God indeed is with us, now and always. May you live long and prosper. Amen.